Welcome to the Paul and Paul show. We've got Michael Vanderree here with us today, and we're going to talk a little bit about the word parish. Paul Sparks, what is the kind of way that you've been using the word parish?
Well, it's great to be with the two of you and to have this conversation. I've been so excited to see the renewal of this word parish. It has both a tremendous history that brings up warm feelings and kind of for some people their history around it. It's a very helpful and good word, and for others it brings some real deep challenges. For us, we have been just wrestling with the idea that over the last 50 years we have lost a vocabulary that describes a geography where people share life together. Even the word neighborhood at times can reflect maybe only a block or just a few people around you in a cul-de-sac versus a livable human scale geography. And of course, this word parish, it functions as both maybe a noun and a verb. A noun in the sense of a geographical location where traditionally a priest or a pastor could be a known character in the life of the community and carry out their duties in a way that was human scale, as it were. And also as a verb, though, because it has a certain telos or purpose to it. There's a certain sense in which how do we live into the kingdom way in the parish? The parish brings a spiritual or sacred component to everyday life. So I think the biggest way that we're seeing this word parish come up again is in the idea that it's the place where the church can share life with the larger community, with the land, with the buildings. It's all of the relations that reside in this kind of livable geography. So that's a piece, at least.
That's good. Thanks, Paul. It is good to be a part of the conversation. Paul, I'm just wondering, in the context of, say, Churches of Christ, Vic, Tas, we have a bunch of congregations or communities, some that exist in rural environments, so they might see parish as being something that they would experience more. They could sort of make that connection. Churches that exist in like an urban or a suburban space where people are drawn from large geographical distances. How do you kind of integrate or define or identify the idea of parish in that setting where it's not perhaps as localised? Maybe I don't know.
Yes. Well, that's a challenging question. It's a challenging question, and it's reflective of some of the struggles we face with the deep fragmentation of life, where we live our lives often in multiple settings, and it really is significant to think about how critical to the nature of being human, the nature of being a follower of Christ, will it be for us to find new ways in difficult contexts to share some life together. So we've worked around this idea that a parish is a geography that's large enough to live a lot of life. In a rural context, that could be 50 square miles, really, if you share the same kind of common watering hole.
Yep.
and people, back in the old days, the barn raising concept, at least in the U.S., that was a tradition where you'd work together in a rural context to build each other's barns, and then you meet at the middle. And so the center created the fabric for shared life. I think in the suburb, you have to ask the question, are there locations within, it might be even a pretty broad swath of suburban geography, are there locations where we can intersect, where we can share some life together? The great person for us to look at in the U.S. was Randy Frazee back in the 90s, when people really weren't thinking about neighborhood and livable, shareable context. Randy Frazee was
welcome
doing
to the Paul and Paul show.
He wrote a book called The Connecting
welcome
Church.
to the Paul and
It was very
Paul
popular back in the day. And he found that in the suburbs, the one place that was intersecting the greatest level of diversity, both in terms of age, gender, ethnicity, so forth, was around the schools. And so he created the school as a center of sorts for a suburban context to say, how can we, living in different places, begin to find some common life and common patterns and common habits around the school? How can we build after-school curriculum and activities and so forth, and create a center, as it were, out of the school? So there are some interesting things, and of course in the urban context, you might have a parish that is only 5, 6, 7 blocks because the population's so dense that you have a place that's large enough to live a lot of life and small enough to be a known character just within that small geography. So each setting requires a different imagination, but I would say the suburban context is the most challenging for sure. But there are many beautiful ways that people are beginning to live into this. Sometimes it means you develop clusters, groups, smaller groups working in their micro neighborhoods, and then coalescing together as church in the middle. And other times it means, can we find a larger center like the school, like the libraries, like sometimes you'll have some shopping complexes and things like that. So it just takes some imagination and some intentionality.
Some of what we're talking about in this conversation can be heard to be somewhat counter to the prevailing shape of church in the West. Any reflections on that?
Yeah. Well, I would say over the course of the last century or two, we really have created an environment where sharing life, learning how to fit together, learning how to forgive one another, learning how to be a team, learning how to be the body of Christ, really, in tangible ways, hasn't been critical to following Christ, And what at one time was the church gathering would have been a critical place to learn, to grow, to be encouraged for the kind of life we would share in the parish. Now that's become the whole deal. Going to the gathering is really the only critical dimension of what it means sometimes to follow Christ. So I think in some ways we've bought into the Western kind of individualistic, industrial age, and lost a little bit of what it means to be human and what it means to be God's people together.
And so the gathering together is important, but it's what we do when we gather, and it's what happens after we gather.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, the gatherings are just such profound and critical space, especially if you are living this out, if you are incarnationally living into the neighborhood. The neighborhood has both redemptive and meaningful effects on our lives, but there are also things that are hard and dark and broken. And to draw back together as church, to practice the core things of our faith together, to exercise, as it were, so that we can be strong and hold our memory and live a worshipful life. That gathering place is critical, but only if it is unto that.
So it's interesting. I find the notion, the reclaiming of the language of parish as being a really helpful reminder of the fact that we live in mission and we engage in terms of what does it mean for us to be a people on the move, connecting with others.
Yes.
And I think that's part of the gift that you've given us.
Yeah, Michael, it's a really strange phenomenon how we oftentimes have created a bifurcation between church time and ministry time, or ministry life and everyday life. In the neighborhood, when you start living into the everyday together, all of life becomes missional as it were, and together in mission.
Thanks very much, Paul and Michael. That's our time for this particular conversation. Look forward to being in the conversation again.
Good on you. Thanks.
Thank you.